I released my Buccaneers Mount Rushmore, and the response was rather mixed. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. CBS Sports released their all-quarter century defense, which had the Bucs well represented, and Baker Mayfield cracks the top 10 of quarterbacks according to the annual survey of teams. That's all coming up in a little bit. Let's start this one off with what caused a lot of social media disagreement, we'll say, between myself and, people on the internet, and that is the Mount Rushmore that I put out on Friday. Now, this was announced with a graphic across social medias, and I didn't realize the blowback that it was going to cause. I was actually in Indianapolis with my son, who had the chance to play basketball on the Indiana Fever court at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. So we were out there all day. I'm having a great time watching him hoop on a professional court, going into their practice facility and watching him play there. It was a great time. And I checked Twitter, and people were unhappy. So for those that didn't see it, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put up the graphic now. But here's who I chose for the Buccaneers Mount Rushmore: Derek Brooks, Mike Evans, Rondé Barber, and Leroy Selman. Now, your reaction, if this is the first time you're hearing or seeing this, is probably the same as many of the people on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all of that. Where is Warren Sapp? So I wanted to take you through my thought process as to why this is what I came up with. First and foremost, this was not easy. No matter what I did, there would be people that thought I was wrong for leaving certain players out. But think about the number of players that you could make a legitimate argument for here. Mike Allstott, John Lynch, Warrick Dunn, James Wilder, Jimmy Giles, Levante David, even Tom Brady. But it was Sapp that got people worked up. I only had 4 spots. First 2 were locks. Brooks, Evans. They were without a doubt going to be on this. They were the 1A, 1B, the 1, the 2, however you want to put it. You do not have a Buccaneers Mount Rushmore without Derek Brooks and Mike Evans. So Brooks has been thought of as the greatest Buccaneer ever for quite some time. And for those that were with me through last summer when I dropped my top 10 Bucs of all time, he came in at number 2 on my list. Mike Evans came in at number 1. Brooks was the ultimate professional, a captain, a leader, was and still is a fixture within the Tampa community, had his greatest season ever when the Bucs went on to win their first Super Bowl, first ballot Hall of Famer, all of that. My reason for Evans being the number 1 player in team history is very similar. Captain, leader, fixture in the community, Super Bowl champion, greatest offensive player in team history, and he did it with quarterbacks that he probably should not have been able to do it with. Now he's on the cusp of doing something that no one has ever done in NFL history. He has a chance to break a long-standing record of Jerry Rice, who many would argue isn't just the greatest receiver of all time, but the greatest football player of all time, and that will cement his legacy. I mean, I feel his legacy is already cemented with the fact that he tied this record of Rice's, but with the chance to break it and doing most of the work with quarterbacks like Josh McCown and Mike Glennon and Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick, like that speaks volumes to how talented he really is. We all believe that Evans should be and will be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and that's not easy to do with the wide receiver position. I don't care that he's never led the league in receptions or yards. He did lead the league in touchdowns, but you can go through every league leader in yards and receptions since 2014 and not find a single player to do what Evans has done for as long or as consistently. So with that said, I had 2 spots left to fill. Leroy Selmon, to me, more than deserved to be there. The original Buccaneer, 6 Pro Bowls, 5 All-Pros, Defensive Player of the Year, 4 double-digit sack seasons, and outside of 1979, was never on a team that was worth a crap. 1979, they make the NFC Championship. They lose to the Rams 9-0. But beyond that, Selmon was part of just one other winning team, and he was still unstoppable. Kind of like Evans and Levante, for those of you that didn't get to watch Selmon. Those guys were on a lot of teams that were severely lacking in talent around them, but they still managed to emerge as standout players and among the best players in the league at their position. Selmon finished his 9-year career with 78.5 sacks. That's the most in franchise history and ahead of Warren Sapp by 1.5. They both played in Tampa for 9 years, but Selmon started his career with 14-game seasons. Now, Sapp had 7 Pro Bowls, 4 All-Pros, and a Defensive Player of the Year, but more on Warren Sapp in a little bit. So, with Selmon getting the 3rd spot, there was only one left, and it came down to putting Sapp in as another defensive lineman, or do I look to one of the other Hall of Famers on this team? So I looked to Rondé Barber. 5 Pro Bowls, 3 All-Pros, Super Bowl champion, biggest play in Buccaneers history. Most consecutive games played by a Buccaneer in franchise history. Most consecutive starts. Only cornerback in NFL history with over 45 interceptions and 25 sacks. The Bucs' all-time leader in interceptions by a wide margin. 3rd in franchise history in tackles. 2nd all-time in franchise history in tackles for loss as a corner. This was a player that revolutionized the nickel corner position. He made it what it is today, because before Rondé, slot corners did not play like they do now. That was Rondé. He did that. Like Brooks, like Evans, like Selmon, he's a fixture and a mainstay within the community. He, just like his teammate Derek, was the definition of what a Buccaneer was. If Jason Light was around when Rondé was playing, it might be his likeness that's painted on the wall instead of Levante's when they list what it means to be a Buccaneer man. So this is the battle that I had. Sapp or Barber. My favorite childhood player was John Lynch, and he didn't even really enter into the equation when narrowing down this final spot. And again, deserving players were going to be left off. But what it came down to for me was the fact that unlike Evans or Selmon or Barber, there was nothing that Sapp did that hadn't been done. He's an absolutely phenomenal player. He's a Hall of Famer. He's one of the greatest of all time at his position, and he was a huge reason that the Bucs won a Super Bowl. He was a huge reason that they went from the Yucks to the Bucs. I'm not trying to diminish his accomplishments. But when making hard decisions like this, you have to start splitting hairs. Evans has done something that only one other player has ever done, and that other player is considered the greatest to ever do it. Selmon was out there on a laughing stock of a team, and he was getting all-pro nods and a gold jacket before the Bucs would ever be competitive. Barber did things that no other corner, no other player in the NFL has ever done. That left Sapp as the odd man out. It doesn't take away what he accomplished with the team, just like leaving Lynch and Allstott and Dunn and Levante off doesn't take away from what they accomplished. But when you have the opportunity to place 4 players on a Mount Rushmore, and you have players from your franchise that have set NFL records or are tied for one and about to become the lone person to hold that record, and you have other teams look at that and they can say, man, that guy was really special, then that's what you do. So Bucs fans, if you're mad, I'm sorry. Other people from the network also commented on the fact that I left Sapp out and said that they were mad, but someone had to miss the cut. I'm just fortunate that I get to talk about a team that has that many players that are worthy of being on there. At the same time, I don't envy the job of Locked On Cowboys or Steelers or Packers or Patriots, because narrowing that down to 4 has got to be an absolute nightmare. So someone had to be left out. And again, if you were with me for my top 10 Bucs of all time series that I did last year, Sapp didn't make my top 4 then either. So it only makes sense to not have him on the Mount Rushmore. One of the greatest defensive tackles to ever play the game. But Rondé Barber is one of the greatest cornerbacks to ever play the game, and he did things that no other player has. Warren Sapp cannot say the same. And I may not have included Sapp and Lynch in my Mount Rushmore, but CBS Sports gave them some love. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Game Time's zone deals pick the best seats in your section for you. With Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay. There are no hidden fees. I just use Game Time to land tickets to a concert in just a couple of weeks, taking my son to see his favorite band as part of the Pro Football Hall of Fame enshrinement weekend. That's going to be an absolute blast. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. All right, Mount Rushmore aside, the Bucs defense was certainly something to marvel at in the early 2000s, and CBS Sports has put together their all-quarter century team. Now, this was put together by Brian Yarcho, and on the defensive side of the ball, the Bucs were well represented. Now, I'll also mention a few guys that played for the Bucs, maybe aren't exactly known for playing for them, but played for them nonetheless, starting with the honorable mentions, which include Ndamukong Suh and Richard Sherman. On the defensive line, Warren Sapp was named as a starter at defensive tackle, who was lined up with J.J. Watt, Aaron Donald, and Jason Taylor. At linebacker, Derek Brooks is named a starter along with T.J. Watt, Ray Lewis, and DeMarcus Ware. First off, Derek Brooks and Ray Lewis lining up together is enough to make every opposing offense in history cry in the fetal position. But beyond that, I feel like I should mention the reserves here. Khalil Mack, Bobby Wagner, Brian Urlacher, Luke Kuechly, and Von Miller. So no nod for Levante David here or in the honorable mentions. Moving to cornerback, Darrelle Revis was named a starter alongside Charles Woodson, while Rondé Barber gets the nod as one of 2 reserves along with Champ Bailey. Now, Yarcho said, quote, Barber led the NFL in picks in 2001, but his most memorable interception took place a year later when he had a 92-yard pick six that clinched Tampa Bay's win over Philadelphia in the NFC Championship, end quote. Again, greatest play in the history of the Buccaneers franchise. And finally, at safety, John Lynch was named a reserve along with Brian Dawkins. They will be behind the safety duo of Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu, which might be the most terrifying safety combo anyone could ever dream of putting together. No qualms there with John Lynch backing up Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu. But all in all, the Buccaneers had 4 members of that early 2000s defense represented as either a starter or a reserve, while 3 other players that spent time with the Bucs, Sue, who recently retired, obviously played a much bigger role for them, during their Super Bowl run than either Revis or Sherman did in their brief stints with Tampa. But, 4 players from that 2000s defense on this list. And no, I do not take Sapp as a starter and Barber as a reserve in this list as proof that I was wrong about the Mount Rushmore, because I don't feel like I was. That's the decision I made. It wasn't an easy one. I felt my process for narrowing it down was fair. So at this point, it is what it is. The thing that I want to focus on here is really just how dominant that defense was. I mean, the Bucs have 4 players on this all-quarter century team. No other NFL team has that many players represented. The closest is the Ravens with 3. That's how great those players were. And think about how everyone talks about how that 2000 Ravens defense is the second greatest defense of all time behind the 85 Bears. Why don't they have more players on this list? It's because the Buccaneers defense was better. I can't remember. It was probably 2 months ago, 3 months ago that I had mentioned, that analytically or, whatever it was, that the Bucs 2002 defense was actually better than the 2000 Ravens. It's just everybody remembers that Super Bowl run that they had and they get all excited and talk about how great it was. No, the Bucs defense was better, and that's represented here. But that's how great those 4 players were. All 4 are in the Hall of Fame. All 4 have Super Bowl rings. All 4 were among the best at their position, not just in the first quarter century, but in the history of the game. 16 out of the 25 players on this all-quarter century team list are in the Hall of Fame. And surely all 25 will be in the Hall of Fame when they all become eligible. Watt and Donald are both first ballot. Probably Garrett and Haloti Ngata are first ballot Hall of Famers as well. These are the best of the best of the best of the last 25 years, with some having played back in the 90s as well, including all 4 of the Buccaneers that made it. I just love that there's one Buck at every single level of the defense on this list. That is absolutely fantastic. The Ravens have a player at 3 of the 4 levels. The Broncos have a couple of players. The Steelers have a couple of players, a couple of honorable mentions. But one team is represented on the defensive line, among the linebackers, at corner, and back at safety. Best defense outside of the 85 Bears in NFL history. And if you don't agree with that, you can argue with a wall, because they were. Flat out, they were. Probably should have won more than just one Super Bowl, but the offense was so anemic for so long that it just didn't work out. And then shortly after that Super Bowl, Sapp leaves, Lynch leaves, things start to change. But that was a dynasty level defense. Unfortunately, the offense was just, outside of 2002, never anywhere close to being good enough for that team to become a dynasty. That's not the only list that we're talking about, though. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, Jeremy Fowler has put together his annual survey of coaches, executives, and scouts to rank the top 10 at every position in the NFL. Now, things kicked off last week with the running backs. Bucky Irving was named as the top honorable mention. An NFL coordinator said this about Bucky, quote, "Combination of speed, quicks, and contact balance. Heck of a runner. rarely goes down on first contact, end quote. I don't have a problem with this. Again, I'm not going to talk out of both sides of my mouth and say that people need to ease off the high expectations and the lofty praise of Jaden Daniels, because he's only played for a year, and then turn around and get upset if Bucky is left off of the top 10. It's fine. Do it again this year, and we can talk about being in the top 10. Do it a second year in a row, and we can talk about it. After that, it was defensive tackles, where Vita Vea came in 9th. Now, his highest placement was 2nd. His lowest was unranked. An NFL assistant coach said, quote, "He's the kind of guy where if you don't have him on your team for a while, playing defense is a lot tougher. A true difference maker," end quote. Again, not going to raise a big stink here. I think he should be higher on this list, but I think not getting the kinds of stats that the guys ahead of him do is what hurts him, even though we have said for years, going back to when David Harrison was on the show with me, that Vita Vea's impact goes beyond the stat sheet. So shout out to whoever ranked him 2nd, because they know what they see, and whoever had him unranked either needs to be fired or they work for the Saints and they don't want to give him the credit that he is due. On to the safeties. Antoine Winfield Jr. came in 7th after being the number 1 safety in last year's survey. His highest rank was 2 this year. His lowest was unranked. Again, probably someone within the division that has a grudge, but I'm not going to speculate too much. But, I mean, Antoine was a guy that was riddled with injuries last year. He was not himself. He did not play particularly well, and it caused a drop-off in production. Plain and simple. One NFL coordinator said, quote, "He plays just like his dad. Great tackler, always around the ball, but with his size mixed with that physicality, you worry about his durability, and that showed up last year." Now, I think we're all expecting a big bounce back year from Antoine, this season, a return to the Himfield moniker. But I will say this about the physicality and the concerns that come with that. I am not concerned about it yet. Okay? And there yet is italicized, it's underlined, it's bold. Here's the thing. I do think that his size and the way he plays the game can be a factor in his durability. However, he gets through this season the way he got through 2023, I think we're going to be all right. Even if he gets through this season the way he got through 2022, I think we're going to be all right. If he starts stringing together multiple seasons where he is out for multiple games, that's when it's time to worry. That's when it's time to say, okay, maybe the best of Winfield has already passed, and it's not because he's not in his prime, but it's because his body is not going to hold up with the wear and tear of the way he plays the game. So I'll throw that out there now. I don't think that's going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope we're back to talking about Himfield all season long. That's when we're having our most fun. But I do want to throw that out there that if all of a sudden this starts to happen again this year, I'm going to be concerned heading into 2026. Tristan Wirfs was named the number 1 offensive tackle on this survey, with his lowest ranking being 7, which is absolutely absurd. He was 4th last year, jumps to number 1 this year. Only player in NFL history to be a first-team All-Pro at both right and left tackle. He allowed just 2 sacks last year, and his 95.9 pass block win rate was the best in the league. An NFC executive said, quote, "He doesn't have the flashy plays that Sewell has, but everything is so easy to him. He can handle whatever you want out there and won't look particularly stressed doing it. Rare combination of size and athleticism," end quote. Bravo to the folks that got this one right. Whoever had him 7th, you are next level wild. Finally, the quarterbacks, and it's the usual suspects up at the top: Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. I know some people were getting mad about this order on Twitter. Personally, I think those 4 are the top like without a doubt, surefire top 4. Put them in whatever order you want, because after them is the tier break. Now, personally, I don't think Patrick Mahomes should be number 1. I would put any of the other 3 at number 1. I don't really particularly think Lamar should be outside of the top 3. Again, put them in whatever order you want. They are the top quarterbacks in the game. Then there's a tier break, and then you start talking about the rest of the bunch. Anyway, after those 4, it goes Jayden Daniels, Matthew Stafford, Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Jalen Hurts, and then Baker Mayfield at number 10. Now, his highest ranking was 5, which puts him as the number 1 quarterback after that tier break. His lowest was unranked. Again, y'all are wild for that one. Last year, he did not make the top 10. This year, he comes in at number 10. One NFL personnel evaluator said, quote, fearless as a thrower and a runner, he's got on-field leadership where teammates want to support him, much better arm than given credit for, good mover in the pocket, and can rush for yards. Attacks the third level of the defense. When he's got time in the pocket, he's as good as almost anybody right now. He honestly reminds me of Favre a little bit as far as style of play. He's got a moxie to him like, F you, I'm on the attack, and defensive guys feel that presence, end quote. All right. I'm not going to do what everyone thinks I'm going to do and freak out, man. Shout out to whoever gets that movie reference. Here's the thing. Only Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson have more total touchdowns over the last 2 seasons than Baker Mayfield. He was the best quarterback in the NFL last season against the blitz, completing over 72% of his passes and throwing 18 of his 40-plus touchdowns against 5 or more pass rushers. Keep hyping up Justin Herbert. Go ahead. Keep hyping him up. Keep telling us that Jayden Daniels is the second coming. And again, I like Jayden Daniels. He's so much fun to watch. But can we get 2 years in a row before we start talking about, like, his lowest ranking was 10th. CJ Stroud was that way last year, and he came in as an honorable mention. Everybody pump the brakes. You can be excited. Commanders fans should be super excited about it. But just calm down. Temper expectations a little bit. There is a sophomore slump that is very real. All right? Keep saying that Matthew Stafford is what he used to be. At this point, it's whatever. All that matters is who performs. All that matters is who goes out there and does the best job. The Buccaneers face Jalen Hurts and Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford and Josh Allen this season. We'll see what happens when they face off and who comes out on top. That's going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Follow on TikTok at Locked On Bucs. Lots of fun stuff going on over there. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. If you want to support the show, but you don't want to be an insider, it's real simple. Leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, or like this episode on YouTube. It really does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.